The Bible tells us that when Christ died, there was darkness at noon. And as black as that was, I want you to know that there was a blackness that equaled it in the lives of the apostles and those who had followed Christ. The first picture I show you is the upper room. The disciples are afraid. They're huddled there. The doors are locked. They're afraid that the Romans will next come and find them and put them on a cross. So they lived in fear. And you can use any word you want. They all fit. They were dazed. They were stunned. They were bewildered. They felt hopeless. They would sit in silence and just think. And there was one thought they kept thinking, we have been defeated. He is gone. He is the one that held little children and raised the dead and gave back sight and hands and life, and he's dead. And he talked about eternity, and now he'll have no part in it. Everybody knows he's dead. The Romans were good at killing people. They didn't miss it. The crowds knew he was dead. We knew he was dead. We saw it. He was dead, crucified, dead, and buried, as the creed says. And we know it, and all they had was darkness to look to. Now, Mary Magdalene loved him because you remember he had thrown 7 demons out of her, and she had a special love for him for the depth of love and forgiveness he had shown her. And she thought, well, I can't talk to him anymore, and he can't look in my face anymore. He's dead, but at least I can go and put spices on the body. I can be of some service to him, to his body, not to him. And I read you the story where she went, and we'll get back to that in a bit. But let me give you the second picture. It's about a week later, and the disciples are suddenly alive because they have found out that Christ was alive. Those on the road came and told them. They finally began to believe the women that he really was alive. And their lives were changed. They were different. They were glad to go out and share. They were not afraid of dying because they knew the one who had died and come back and said, in me you shall live too. When I follow someone, I don't want to follow someone that finally dies and we bury him and that's the end of it. I want to follow someone that overcame death because I'm going to experience it. It doesn't matter how much you jog or how much you diet, you're going to die. You may look better when you die if you jog a lot, but you're going to die. That's for sure. It really is. Death is an equal opportunity. Everybody gets to. There's one death for one birth. And when I was 20 years old, I thought I was going to live at least forever. I mean, that's why they want fighter pilots to be in their early 20s. You're going to live forever. And you don't mind flying the jet like that, you see. And when I was in my teens, I thought, oh, death is so far off, I'll never know it. And then some of my people in high school died. And I thought, oh boy, it is real now when I'm 16. And now that I've gotten way up in age, it's a lot, this horizon is a lot closer than the horizon I left. And I know I'm not going to live forever. My body's telling me that. But I know the man who did, who went to prepare a place for me, and you, and everyone who believed that there is life beyond the grave. This is this Jesus. And they were changed because it happened. And now they were a fearless group. 50 days later, at Pentecost, thousands came to know the Lord because they were witnessing and Simon Peter was preaching. And he was preaching the main message, he's alive. He came back. David isn't? He is. He's alive. You can trust him. This has always been the thing. Listen, if there was no resurrection, we wouldn't be here talking about the cross today. Somebody said the only way to look at the cross is through the open tomb. You've got to see the open tomb, because God puts his hand on Jesus and says, he is my son, I bring him back. He's alive and will be forevermore. You see, the resurrection answers it all. It really does. And they were preaching this. They believed it. They had personal experiences with him. He talked to them. And he said to Thomas, and blessed are those who have not seen but believe. That's us. All down 2,000 years, people have also felt his presence. In all of their misery and all of their problems, they have felt it. And he has been alive to them. He is alive. And we can face tomorrow because of it. I want you to notice also that in the early church, there were no trips out to see the empty tomb. It's nowhere in the New Testament. Other than those that ran the first day, they sort of forgot about it. When we went to Israel, and I know you've been to Israel, because Paul Joseph was one of my associates over at the other church, and he came here. And I think he had a trip every year, didn't he, to the Holy Land. And I went with him once on his trip. And there were 2 tombs for Christ. Have you all been there to this? There are 2 tombs. And they'll put you on a bus and take you to both. He came out of this one, he came out of that one. The church had forgotten which one it was. Because he was so alive, they didn't have to go back and look at the empty tomb to be sure. He was alive in their lives. And when they preached, he became alive in other people's lives. You see? So there were no bus tours to the empty tomb. They didn't need it. He was alive. That was what was important. God had honored him. God had said, as he did on the mount, this is my son, hear him. Mount of Transfiguration. Well, this really proved it. He's alive. You listen to him. And if you're following anybody else that's going to die, you're following the wrong person. If you're following someone who has already overcome death, then you've got the right person. And that's Jesus Christ himself. We have died with him, Paul said, and we live by faith. We have. And when he said, I am the resurrection and the life, it had some meaning because he had come back from the tomb. But the question is, where is he today? He's looking for you. When he came back from the dead, he went looking. He went, Simon Peter had gone back to fishing. Really the only thing he knew to do. That was his trade. And you'd think Christ would say, now I'm going to tell you off. You betrayed me those times. You didn't stay with me when I died. You were gone with the rest of them. But that's not the kind of, you say, man, I sinned so much. I've done so much. God wouldn't want me. He went back for the disciples. They would have been the last person I think I would have looked for. I'd have looked for some new ones probably. But he went back to them because that's the kind of love he has. And Thomas said, I won't believe unless, he was an empiricist, unless I can put my finger where the scars are. And Jesus came and said, look. He didn't say you're supposed to have faith. He said, look, be believing. And Thomas believed. Thomas missed the first time he came back, and the second time, Christ asked for him especially. So if you're having trouble with doubts, and they do creep in, and you never tell the preacher because you want to stay a good, pristine Christian in front of him, but if you ever have doubts, talk to me or some of these other good people that have good training. But Thomas doubted. Thomas doubted. And Christ went looking for him. See, he doesn't give up on you. He goes looking for you. He looks for you every way he can. He sees two people on the road that are just brokenhearted. He says to them, what's wrong? And they said, well, this man, this Jesus, we thought he was the one that was coming to deliver Israel, and he's dead. They killed him. And then Jesus started talking to them about the resurrection. And they became followers, and they ran back to tell the apostles, he's really alive. We walked with him, you see. So you ask where he is, he's looking for people. And he brings life into death. I have known people that have had dead marriages that have come back out of the tomb and lived. When I was teaching this family and marriage and family, one of the Christian psychologists said, this woman came and said, our marriage just isn't right. There's just something wrong with it. Just something wrong with it. And he said to her, let me tell you what to do, what to try, okay? Will you try it? Oh, I'll try anything. He said, go back and be the most loving wife you can be to that man. Be forgiving. Show the love of Christ. Show the patience of Christ. Be all you can be. You can't make him anything else, but try it. And she came back in 3 months, and he said, well, how can I help you now? And she says, you don't need to. He's a different man now. Now, the love of Christ went into that marriage and did something that she couldn't do by herself, or her friends do for her. And I have seen marriages come alive that were dead. And he still walks and he still looks for you. Bud Bradley, and some of you know him because you were in the church there, he came one time and said, I want you to talk to me about the Lord. I don't know him like you're talking about. So I took a little tract there, the 4 spiritual laws, some of you remember that, and I went over it and I said, Bud, you can make this decision tonight if you want. He said, I think I'll wait. And I said, that's fine. You don't have to come to the church right now or when I leave or whenever. You can kneel down and say, Lord, come into my heart, and he will. You don't have to be in a cathedral to find Christ. He's in your home too. And a couple of weeks later, he came to the church and said, Pastor, I did what you said, and he's real. He's real. And he had such faith that he got cancer of the lungs. And this is a great witness. And people said to him, yeah, you became a Christian. Where's God? You're just dying. He said, listen, I smoked all my life. I did this to me. And when he was in the hospital, if you visited him, here's what he'd say to you. He'd say, is there anything you want to tell Jesus? Because I'm going to see him pretty soon. Now, there was a man that had found the resurrection and found the resurrected Lord. I mean, it's still happening today. And when he died, he wanted that tract put in his coffin, and it was buried with him. That was what he had found, the scriptures in that text. He had found the Lord. I was with a Japanese soldier one time, a former soldier. He fought in World War II. He was in China. His home city was Hiroshima, where they dropped the first atomic bomb. And it was, of course, obliterated. You've seen the pictures and all. And he said, I wanted to kill myself. The emperor wasn't divine anymore. We had lost the war, and my town was destroyed. But he said, I went back and walked through the rubbish in that town, and suddenly these doors opened, and some people came out, and they were filled with joy on their face. I could see it. And I asked, who are you? Everything's gone, and you have joy. They said, we're Christians. The resurrected Lord touched him, And he was over here at New Orleans Seminary studying to be a minister to go back and tell the rest of the people about a risen Lord. You see, he does that. I had a friend who was really a cut-up, and in school he didn't study. School was nothing to him. The teachers were all dumb, you know, that kind of thing, like we are when we get 16 sometimes. And why am I going here? I know as much as they do. And the Lord touched him and redeemed him, and he moved to the front of the class and became an A student. And he then went, later in life, he studied so hard, he became head of the religion department at San Diego State. But I'm telling you, the Lord's still looking for young people. He's still looking for older people. He's looking for anybody that doesn't know him and trust him and share the resurrection faith. There's a man in Orlando that had a mission for just the people that never bathed, that stayed on the street. I have been around some, and really it's hard for your eyes not to water. I'm not teasing. It's that bad. Well, he had been a criminal in New York, part of the mob. And they rolled him out of a car one time going pretty fast. And he was in the hospital for months. And then they just let him out, and he slept. He slept in the gutter. He slept in the alleys. When it was winter, he tried to roll up in newspapers to stay warm. And one day, some fella said to him, why don't we go over to that mission down the street? I mean, it's warm in there, and they feed you. Well, he didn't have either warmth or food. And he said, well, it's worth trying. And he went in, and when he went through the door, a man stepped up to him and put his arm around him and said, you are welcome here. We are so glad you're here. He found the Lord, and he said, I'm going after other people that have been like I have. And he came to Orlando, Florida, and it was written up in the newspapers and all. He and his wife took the dirtiest people off the street and bathed them and put clean clothes on them and told them about a Lord who had redeemed them. I'm telling you, Christ is still looking for people. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. And there's something very personal about it. My dad was a little man. He always wondered how I got so big. He was not quite 5 feet high. Because when he was 15 years old, he was 6 feet high, and he got an infection in his foot. And his parents argued over it, and one of them won and said, we won't lance it, let's let it alone and see what happens. And red marks started coming up. Now, this was about 1910, and they didn't have much medicine then for blood poisoning. And the family doctor came out, put him on the kitchen table, and took his leg off. He said, it's the only way you're going to live. Well, the thing settled in his hip and drew him up. In all of his life, he walked with a walking stick and bent over. And he said to me one time, son, sometimes I feel like an animal, and I felt so bad, but there was nothing that could be done, but he had life. And the Lord gave him 82 years. But you know, I had a dream one night. I dreamed that I was in heaven. It's the only time this has happened to me. And there was Dad, and he was walking towards me, and he was tall and straight. He wasn't bent over, and he greeted me and welcomed me, and the dream ended. And I thought, Lord, that's great. You've gone to prepare a place for him, and he's enjoying it now, and I'll see him later. This is what the resurrection means, that the grave doesn't end at all. It's like the ending is the beginning of something new that all of us need to experience. I heard one of the wisest things. This man said, he was head of a great religious organization, It is wise to give up what you cannot keep to get what you cannot lose. You're going to lose your life. You can count on it. We're all going to die. And you can't keep it forever. You just can't. But when you get God's eternal life through Christ and the power of the resurrection, it's something you can't lose. So don't hang on to something that you will lose when you can give it up for something you will never lose. And when you trust Christ, when you trust that he really was the Son of God who came to forgive our sins and did in fact, and is forgiving our sins, when you trust him, at whatever age you are, you become the child of God, and Christ becomes real to you, and Christ lives with you. And so as we end today, it could be the beginning. It's the end of the sermon, but it could be the beginning for you of a new life. You're tired of your old one? Trade it in for one you're not going to lose. And I invite you, have the courage now. Don't wait till you're 35 to accept the Lord. You've missed all those good years of living with him. So I invite you to come as we sing our hymn of invitation and say, this is the day that I come publicly and say I start walking with Christ. He died publicly for me. Well, publicly I will say I'll live for him. And as we stand and sing, as God has called you, because see, he's still looking. He maybe has whispered in someone's heart today, this is the time. I'll meet you down front with the others that come. You come and know Christ.